Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody who joins us. My name is Olga Tamanova, and the Ukrainian media center Ukrinform continues its operation today. It's day 408 of the full-scale invasion of our homeland by Russian occupiers, and now we will be talking about the work of our Air Force. Joining us online is Yuriy, Ignat, spokesperson of the Air Force Command of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Good afternoon, Mr. Yuriy. Good afternoon. Mr. Yuriy, lately, within the last couple of days or maybe even weeks, in our media space and in the media space of our partners, the counteroffensive is being discussed. So let's start with this topic. What are the measures that we need on part of the Air Force for the counteroffensive? Well, there was a lot of information about the counteroffensive. I wouldn't be so drastic that counteroffensive is so necessary. Obviously, there is a desire to liberate our lands, but the question of this war that many experts, including Western analytics, said that this will be the war to exhaust the material, the technical resources, and human resources. So this offensive or counter-offensive, it's quite difficult to call it so, because we're talking about, for example, Air Force. It's necessary to make sure that the counter-offensive is successful, and for that we need the prevalence in the air. So because counter-offensive under fire of enemy's aviation, it would be quite complicated, diplomatically saying, because the enemy continues offensive actions on the land, they continue the offensive in the air. I mean the guided air bombs and missiles launched from the ships. We exercise the air defense combat. We damage enemy aviation when they come in proximity to our borders. So to say that counter-offensive should be happening now without reinforcement of our aviation, without us getting prevalence in the air, it's too early. But we understand that the Western countries keep reinforcing us. Within some short perspective, there will be both Patriot and some T coming, along with the teams of people who are already trained to work on those air defense systems. It will give us prevalence, it will reinforce us in the sectors where it's necessary, but we would like to have the F-16, first of all, aircraft supplied to us of 4+ generation fixed-wing aircraft. This would help us to get prevalence in the air. Mr. Yuriy, recently there was a feedback from our American partners who evaluated the skills of our pilots quite highly. Can you give us a few comments on that? Well, the high-skilled pilots, they underwent this testing. Well, I wouldn't call it training, but rather testing. Their skills were studied, the level of their training was studied to understand how quickly they would be able to master up-to-date cutting-edge technologies such as F-16, and it's no secret to anybody. Well, I apologize for this minor technical problem. So the commander of aviation of the Air Force mentioned that according to the results of the first tests, the less time would be necessary, because previously the period of half a year was discussed. So now we're talking about the shorter period of time, because our partners have seen that our guys are ready to master the material, and not only to fly, but also to use all the weapons which come in complex with this aircraft. Well, the attacks of the enemy from the air, the impression is that their tactics has changed. So what do you see as the professional? Well, their air attack tactics really changed. We see that they start using less aviation in the proximity to our borders. A lot of their material was destroyed recently. I mean, during the operation of liberation of our lands in Kharkiv and Kherson region, the enemy uses aviation more. They use the guided aviation bombs. They now use a lot more of this type of ammunition. Su-35, Su-34 aircraft are used to launch those bombs from the distance of more than 50 kilometers from the forward edge of the battle area. But for the time being, we understand that we don't have any means to drive enemy aviation away from our borders and from the forward edge of the battle area. Dear colleagues, if you have any questions, please go ahead. Anastasia Rakuta, Ukrinform. The Air Defense Forces mentioned the liability against Telegram channels for posting the real-time images of the aircraft and our air defense means. So were any of those guilty brought to liability? I apologize, I've only heard whether they've heard your advice. So whether they listened to your advice and whether those administrators of the Telegram channels were brought to liability. We were talking about the Telegram channels who disseminated the information about the movement of aircraft. Well, we are not investigators or law enforcement agency to do some actions you mentioned about, so we think that the law enforcement agencies should react in case they see any violation of law in this by those Telegram channels. We just announced how dangerous it is and what are the threats and why it should be stopped, because the situation that we've seen, it intensified in terms of detailization for fulfillment of the battle tasks by our units and detailization of the enemy presence in the airspace of Ukraine. Well, it told us about it resulted in disappearance of enemy aircraft from the radars. Mr. Yuriy, we apologize, we stopped hearing you. We have some minor technical problems. We will try to switch the sound back on. Mr. Yuriy. Are you hearing us, Mr. Yuriy? Mr. Yuriy, are you hearing us? Your microphone is off. Can you please switch it on so we could continue? One, two. Oh, the sound is back on. I apologize for the technical problems. I was using my phone to get connected to your broadcast. We haven't heard your last answer. Can you please repeat it? Well, it's not important who got offended by whom or who tries to treat everything with humor. It's important to have everybody to listen to those requirements, to comply with them. I mean, publishing the information is allowed, but please don't give a lot of details about that. I mean, publishing the screenshots from our systems I don't know how do they get on those Telegram channels. That's a whole different story. But again, we were heard. It's not my personal position, it's the position of the command, not only of the Air Force Command, but the armed forces, the command of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. So those publications, they disappeared. So I want to thank everybody who heard us and who supports the population with information to have everybody understand what's going on. But let's make sure that the enemy doesn't get any sensitive information. Mr. Yuriy, we've seen yesterday that our Air Force downed another Ka-52 rotor wing aircraft. We know that the enemy was very cautious with regard to entering our airspace. So does this incident tell us that they continue trying to do this nevertheless? Well, the rotor wing aircraft cannot be used from afar. Their tactics is to come closer to damage their targets. But the helicopter can fly on low altitudes, and they can not only use the landscape, but they can fly very low above the river, for example, or a road, so it's hidden behind the trees. And down in the helicopter is not that easy sometimes. But if they get into the field of vision of the SAM operator, they will obviously be destroyed. So without aviation, it's very difficult to get any prevalence on the battlefield. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining our broadcast. Reminding you, joining us was Yuriy Ignat, the spokesperson of the Air Force Command of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Our team is working on the schedule for Monday, so bear with us. Trust in our armed forces, and glory to Ukraine.